International greetings. I'm Janet Booth, a professional astrologer from West Hartford, Connecticut, and welcome to my program on astrology called Looking Up. The topic for this show is 2019, Rekindling Hope. And I suppose I could have named it different things, like calm between two storms, or planets giving us a break, something like that. Now, if you watched the November program about Jupiter in Sagittarius, you would know one reason why I'm using the hope word, because Jupiter spends about 1 year in each sign as it goes around the whole zodiac in 12 years. And 2019 is our year for Jupiter going through Sagittarius, and that's the sign it's most strongly associated with, called its sign of rulership. And when a planet is in the sign that it rules, it has its most true to its own nature influence. So Jupiter is the planet of optimism, kind of forward motion, progress. If you think about the archer in Sagittarius, holding that bow and arrow up high and aiming for the stars. So that's what we hope to do, is aim for the stars in 2019. And I encourage you, if you did not hear that program, to go back and listen to that. And of course, you can find it online at West Hartford Community Television's station, whctv.org. Look under Video on Demand. Maybe that's in a programming tab. You'll find it. Anyway, and it's up on YouTube. But it's best to come in through the doorway of the station and maybe even think about giving a donation to the station, because Jupiter's also very generous. Okay, so when we want to talk about what is the nature of a year, is it a good year, is it a bad year? Of course, those are judgmental terms, and it's all relative now, isn't it? But we look in terms of what are the most difficult things that planets can be doing, what are the easiest things that planets can be doing. So when planets are in their own sign, as I mentioned with Jupiter in Sagittarius, they come out with their strongest expression. So we've had for several years now, I think since 2012, Neptune going through Pisces. That's a sign that it rules. So that gives us a very strong orientation towards what's going on with our faith, or faith versus fears. It's the sign most about oppressed peoples or suffering, and it's not all about suffering. I mean, it's a great combination for the arts and entertainment and, music and movies, plays, things like that, which all are under the auspices of Neptune and Pisces. But we will see that there's, kind of like floods of refugees and things like that. And we've also had a lot of attention on the opioid crisis, and Pisces and Neptune ruled drugs, street drugs, prescription drugs. And this has also been a period in which we've had the legalization of marijuana around a lot of places in the United States. So that kind of puts a little bit of the Neptune into perspective. Now, in 2018, we had Saturn come into Capricorn, that it rules. I mean, it probably came in very, very late 2017. But for the whole year, we've had it. And Saturn spends about 2.5 years in a sign, so it's going to be there throughout all of 2019 as well. And this is the sign in the planet that has most to do with structure and rules, boundaries, the rule of law. And just kind of how things function. It's the planet of government, for instance. And for years in Capricorn, we've had the planet Pluto, which is the major planet about change, kind of like long evolutionary transformational change. Oftentimes this is accomplished through destruction and reconstruction. One of the symbols for Pluto energy, or Scorpio, the sign that Pluto rules, is the phoenix rising from the ashes of what's been burned out. So we would expect to see some big structural changes in government, and this is also the planet of shared resources, joint money matters, stock markets, commodities, taxes. Wow, we just had a big change in 2018. I think they must have passed it in 2017 for how we're going to do our taxes in the United States. When you go to file in April of 2019 for your 2018 taxes, or you might do it before April, but some of us wait till the end, it's going to be different than how it's been for years and years and years. So accountants are all busy learning all the new rules. So we have rules, Capricorn, about taxes, Pluto. Trying to think what else we've got going on with that. Kind of got that disparity growing between the very, very rich and everybody else. And you know, the greatest income disparity in the US up till this point was right before the big stock market crash in 29. So, you know, people who watch the markets and they say, oh, usually there's some kind of recession about I forget what the rule is, not a rule, but trend, something in the neighborhood of 7, 8, 9 years. It's kind of like we're getting due. And frankly, I didn't think it was going to happen in 2018 because Jupiter, that planet of growth, progress, optimism, was in a nice connection with Pluto, the planet that rules the markets. And so the market's kind of up and up and up. Well, until November. November, we're starting to have some trouble now with some downturn. And I'm filming this on the 14th of November. And mostly that started happening just in the past week or so with once Jupiter has moved out of Scorpio, the sign ruled by Pluto with all the joint money matters, and now it's into Sagittarius, which we're supposed to be more hopeful, but sort of the boost that it gave to the markets may have passed. And astrologers are keeping their eye on 2020 particularly, and even into 2021, because once Jupiter finishes this 2019 in Sagittarius, it goes to the next sign, which is Capricorn, and then it's going to be joining up with Saturn. Meanwhile, Saturn's moving up to join up with Pluto. The three of them are going to get together. Now, Saturn sometimes has the brakes. It slows things down. It is a planet of long term. Maybe this will mean we really kind of get our act together about what's happening with things like income disparity. But if not, I think it's going to be a pretty major correction. And it could come earlier than that. And I'm not a financial astrologer, that's a specialty, but I watch it a little bit, I dabble in it. And if you look at things like, you know, the Mountain Astrologer magazine, already they're starting to have articles about 2020, you know. Everybody's like jumping over 2019 and kind of leaping right into looking at 2020. And it's kind of easy to do because it's a rounder kind of number, and it's going to be another presidential election year. But I think the big thing that they're looking at is here comes this kind of powerful combination in 2020, late especially, and into early 2021. Every 20 years, Jupiter passes Saturn, so that's always important to be looking at. And the next one will occur in the very earliest degree of Aquarius, really when the two of them get out of Capricorn. So that's going to be hopefully sort of that new age of Aquarius kind of energy. My friend Sally Fabian, who's a numerologist out in San Francisco, is the one who really told me about the difference between 1 and 2 energy. And 1 is male energy, kind of like the phallus, and it's also self kind of energy. 1, there's just me first. 2 is, well, there's 2 of us, we have to watch out for each other, or it's the female energy. So when we cross the line from the 1900s to the 2000s, now everybody being born has a 2 in their birth date and in their birth numbers, whereas before that, for 1,000 years, everybody had a 1. So now that we've been in the 20 teens, there's also been a 1 in every single year. And you know, some months have 1s, and of course there's 1s in the days of, a lot of the days of each month. But for getting into that more of the 2 kind of energy, it really does come in 2020. You're going to have 2021, gets you one more 1 in there, and then from 2022 to 2029, no ones. So this is supposed to be the millennium of women, if it's the female or the goddess kind of energy. And we do see that there's more and more of the woman power coming in our country, at least. And I'll just mention this so I don't forget it later. At the 2018 midterm election, on election day, the 3 planets that are most related to woman kind of energy, which would be the moon and Venus, obviously, and the dwarf planet Ceres, named for the goddess of harvest and fertility. It's almost like a minor, another kind of moon or maternal energy. They were all together, I mean, within like a degree or so of each other, and rising ahead of the sun, ahead of sunrise, and sun is the male energy. So it kind of gave me the feeling like here come women united, going to kind of take the lead over things and maybe over the men. And we did see a really big wave of women being elected, most of them Democrats, but some in the Republican Party. So when I go looking at the year and I start getting excited, well, a little excited because it's just a little better, you put it in the perspective. So for years we had a really horrible, difficult, what we call a square, 90 degrees, between Uranus, shock, sudden change, and Pluto, long-term change. So it's a real big push and force for change, and it has a lot to do almost with like rebellion, things like that. And it was precipitated mostly by Uranus, which when it came into Aries in 2011, we started having the Arab Spring after that, and there's just been loads of gun violence, which guns and weaponry are ruled by or associated with Aries. And we've had just horrible fires. The planets do that thing called retrograde, where they go backwards into the sign. Well, they don't always go into the sign before, but they go backwards or look like they're going backwards. So Uranus did get out of Aries for a little while into Taurus, but it came back. And when it came back was here, we had these horrible fires. The Camp Fire in California, the worst one in history so far, was with this Uranus back in Aries. So we had that long square. There were 7 times that it was exact from 2012 to 2015, and a lot of other things put pressure on it too, quicker planets mixed in with it. So what we're looking at is how do the planets get along? If they're together, called conjunct, that joins their energies. Sometimes that's a good thing if they're nice planets or they get along well, or their energies blend well. Or if their energies are conflicting, a conjunction, it's called, is not necessarily so good. So then there's opposition, 2 things across from each other, a natural sort of either balancing or conflict. And the square, the 90 degrees, a variation of that would be half of that, 45, or 1.5 squares to 135. All of those are what we call the hard aspects in astrology. And when I look to see, do any of the slow-moving outer planets stay in those patterns for a long time, that makes a difficult year. So 2019, no major conjunctions. No major oppositions. I believe I'm correct in saying that. That is right. 1 major square, and that one is Jupiter that magnifies with Neptune that can confuse us and can give us fears or doubts. Things are hidden. They're difficult to see. They develop behind the scenes or on an invisible level. Sometimes we find that there's deception with Neptune also. Jupiter, a planet of out in the open, and its powerful sign of Sagittarius, out in the open. So I believe that this square is going to bring out things that have been hidden. And of course, the thing that comes immediately to mind is what went on with our election in 2016 and everything since then with the Mueller investigation, and what are we going to find out about that? So there are 3 dates in 2019 that this square is exact, and that is January 13th, June 16th, and September 21st. And that 21st is only 2 days before the fall equinox. Things that are in place at the start of a season kind of have a ripple effect through the season. So we will see that fall has some energy on that, but it gets going right early in the year. And we do have one of the 45 degrees and another of the 45 plus 90, 135. Those are considered minor. They're still in the difficult category. They're maybe not as potent as those squares or oppositions. And we've had this Uranus weirdness going on with Neptune confusion since 2017, and it makes 5 connections, and the last one is 5/19 of 2019. So we're getting ready to put that to bed. And during this, I think, has been a lot of this attention on the opioid crisis, and hopefully we're going to get something squared away and settled with that. So then we look to see, and I might mention this too, the slower the planets, the more long-ranging or long-lasting the effects. And then they're amplified at certain times when quicker planets kind of interact in their pattern or form patterns with them. So what we'd like to see if we had a good year is things that are making what's called the grand trine, an equilateral triangle around the zodiac. And we don't really have major stuff with that. We have, I think probably the best one is in August, Saturn, Chiron, Mars, I believe, if I could find my notes. Got a lot of notes. Too many little details. You can drown in the details if you don't watch out. But yes, I was looking at how August seemed to have a nice full moon, I believe it was, that had that pattern going. So the other thing that can be nice sometimes is what are called the quintiles and biquintiles, 1/5, 2/5 of the sky apart, have a talent and luck side to them. And especially if you get a triangle of those things going. And we do have a little bit of that. Let's see. I liked this. Pluto and Chiron, and they've been doing this since 2018, and they got a couple of dates in 2019, 5/21, 10/18. So the 5/21, it's so close to that other 5/19 that was the square between Jupiter and Neptune. So that's kind of a, you'd like to act underneath these lucky triangles, but if you also got kind of a difficult connection going, not the best time for it. So when we see this combination of Chiron and Pluto, Chiron is known as the wounded healer. It says, let's expose what the problem is and try to fix it. And Neptune wants also things to kind of turn around or get rid of what's not working so that we can regenerate in a new direction. So this is trying to help us heal things up and improve things. And Mars comes in and makes the triangle with them a couple of times. One is in April, 23rd to the 26th, but it's followed exactly on the 27th by one of these 45s between the weird and confusing Uranus-Neptune. So that's not a good time for action. The other one is there in the middle of August, the 13th to the 16th, with the the full moon there on the 15th, I believe. Yes, okay. So that's a good month for you to do something around the middle of August. And I would encourage you to come to my website, astrologybooth.com. And in the study booth, you will find a tab called On a Page. And in that is a free PDF download for each year. You can get the 2019. It's called 2019 on a Page. There's an explanation page that tells you about one of the different planets, how many are backwards at once. And this is really the nice page. It's bar graph. It shows you the black part is when the planets are going backwards, so you can see sometimes there's a bunch of them at once. Also has all your new and full moons with the degrees that they happen at. And most people pay attention to these Mercury retrogrades, which are 3 weeks at a time, for about 3 times a year. But that's when sometimes things go a little bit haywire, or you have to redo things if they're started during that period. It's not when you want to sign contracts, not when you want to buy a house. If you sell a house, well, then it's buyer beware. So that On a Page will tell you that we start the year off with not very many planets retrograde. There's a nice period in January into February with nothing going backwards, and we end the year with nothing going backwards as well. In fact, one of the nicest points in the year is the December 26th new moon. Oh, and that's an eclipse. Yes, ending the year very well. So, what I would like to say is, it's not that it's a perfect year, but it's not as bad as many that we've had in the recent past. And it's not probably as challenging as what's coming up in 2020. So make your best that you can here in 2019. So who's going to have it easiest? Well, as we have seen in some prior years, there's not a lot of activity going on in the sign of Gemini, so they should have a pretty easy year. And we might say there's not a lot in Scorpio either. Who's got it kind of tough? Well, it's an interesting year for Aries because Mars is in that condition called out of bounds, meaning sort of riding it either very high or very low in the sky, higher or lower than where we see the sun's path go through. And that's from April 20th to June 22nd. So that's a time when you tend to have actions that are either inappropriate, too much, too little. Same thing, it's a planet of action and anger. So if tempers are going to flare, that's a time to kind of be careful. And especially because we're also going to see, well, it's a little earlier in the year, that the ruling planet of Aries goes into Aries, which it will spend usually about a month or so in each of the signs, or maybe up to 2 months. It takes about 2 years to go through all 12 signs. So on New Year's Eve day, Mars goes into Aries, and it stays there till Valentine's Day. So even though we have that sort of hardly any planets backwards, or called retrograde, in the January into February, we got this Mars charging forward through Aries, go, go, go. And I think that's going to be a time when you really want to get some plans in motion, no matter what your sign is. I mean, if you're an Aries, all the better, but anybody can use the energy of the planets. Now, you might remember that really slow new dwarf planet called Eris, named for Mars' sister, the one that's way out past Pluto and caused all the ruckus where the astronomers redefine what a planet is. It usually has to do with kind of strong, independent, I don't need anybody. It's sort of warrior energy. It's really like female warrior energy, but men can express it too. And it kind of has to do with chaos and discord as well. So now Mars passes right by Eris, sister and brother together, on 3rd of February. So that might be a little bit shaky around then. And we also have, at the very last degree of Aries, when it's just about done, on the 13th of February, it passes Uranus. And Uranus is just finishing up in Aries at that time too. And that's a kind of hairy period. I think Valentine's Day will be a little bit weird this year. Okay, now as soon as Uranus gets out of Aries, or maybe it's the day before, I think it's the day before, Chiron comes in. This is a big shift. So Chiron is, I want to heal things up. Uranus was, I want to, shock people and shake them up and, anyway. Yes, it's very volatile. So Chiron in Aries, I'm hoping, is going to help us get a handle on some of this gun violence and just in general people's combative attitudes. And meanwhile, we see that sort of rebellion planet, Uranus, is going to go 7 years into Taurus. And hopefully that means that things kind of slow down and people aren't as revolting. Now, Taurus is a sign about Earth, Mother Earth. And if that's where the shakeups are coming from Uranus, we may see more earthquakes. Or we may just see Mother Earth sort of rebelling against what we've been doing with more of her kind of fires or mudslides or this or that. Okay, so let's see. Mars is the quickest planet, is the one that oftentimes triggers the other slower planets or adds to the patterns that are going on. So throughout 2019, we'll have some programs where we go into some of this a little more in depth. We've got our eclipses are in Cancer and Capricorn. Those are signs that are seeing a lot of activity, and we already talked about Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. And by the end of the year, on December 2nd, Jupiter enters. And of course, we said Sag has a really big year because it's got Jupiter there. Nice thing for Libra, I really like this. There's a little asteroid named for Jupiter's wife, Juno, and it has to do with marital matters. It takes about 4 or 5 years, 5-ish, I think, to go around the zodiac. Coming into Libra on November 3rd of 2019, staying there until September 20th of 2020. So this is the marriage asteroid in Libra, the sign of relationships and marriages, and there should be some good periods in there for people who want to have weddings. So maybe you're going to wait for 2020 for your wedding. Let's see what else is very important here. I'm sure there's much more than what I want to talk about that I haven't gotten to. Oh, some years we have Mars retrograde. Some years we have Venus retrograde. 2018 was one of those years. Not in 2019, no Venus, no Mars. So that's good, if you ask me. So let's see what else. Oh, here's lovely. Venus and Mars are together on August 24th. I told you August is one of the better months. And we also see that when Venus goes into Libra, the 14th of September, it comes in with Mercury. So there's talk about fairness. There's more diplomacy. That's a really good month for business partnerships to be formed, or even just to make those wedding plans for when Juno gets into Libra. So I see that we're winding down in our time today, and I just want to tell you, rekindle hope in your heart. See what you can do with the planets in 2019. And we'll be talking about that more in some upcoming episodes of Looking Up.